Are cucks genetically low value men? Yeah. Is being a cuck a mating and reproductive strategy for genetically low value males? Yeah. I can see how it could be construed as that. Alpha seed and cuck cash. Yeah. Okay. But here's what I would say. You have to remember, and this goes back to Mac and Murphy's sort of point here about the extra pair paternity. It's not about who's tricking who. It's about how many kids are born to fathers that, or how many children are fathered by biological fathers who the father that's in the home is not the biological father. Because we have, ever since the sexual revolution, we have systematically made it socially acceptable, at least in Western countries, for women to not necessarily cuckold them, but to sort of, I call this a retroactively or proactively cuckold men. Now, what's the difference there? The proactive cuckold is the one who is exactly what Mac and Murphy is talking about. It's deception. It's cuckoldry by deception. It's she goes out, runs around, gets fucked, and then gets pregnant, and then says it's your baby. That's proactive cuckoldry. And in the case that he's talking about here, it being 30%, I think he's right. I sincerely doubt it's 30%. And whatever those stats are, you're never going to get accurate stats for those, because it's in women's best interest to keep that secret, right? I mean, they don't want anybody to know. It would have to be self-reported, or it would have to be incidentally reported. And by that, I mean, like, a man would have to discover that the kids aren't actually biologically his own kids. And they would have to take that. Okay, that's a stat. We got it here. Now we can start working with percentage points, right? Very difficult to get those accurate statistics for that without 23andMe or some genetic testing that we're all required to do. The other side of this is that if you look, now that we have plotted the human genome, we can also find out that as far back as 8,000 years ago, 17 women for every one man reproduced. So there is a huge variation of reproductive success amongst men versus women. So 17 women reproduce for every one man. Now, that has been narrowed down into modern times for one man for every 7 women now. Okay, bravo, socially enforced monogamy. All right, agriculture. But that's still 7-1. Okay, it might not be as bad as 17-1, but it's still 7-1. Nature takes chances with men. Any sex that has the least amount of, let's say, spends the least energy or has the least investment in the reproductive process, that's the sex that the environment and evolution takes the most chances with. And of course, that's testosterone, right? But still, that variation still points to the fact that, well, A, women are promiscuous, and B, and not always, but like there's a lot of variation in there. It could be a warfare. It could be other things. There's a lot of other factors, but those factors generally focus on and affect men and their reproductive success, whereas women can reproduce. That's it. Right? So, but now, in the terms of retroactive cuckoldry, that's where I'm getting at right now. And this is where I throw everything away that Mac and Murphy was trying to sort of get on his sermonizing about, essentially. If I can convince you that as a beta male, or as a good sexual strategy, as good game, like single mommy game, if I can convince a guy that he will be socially rewarded, he'll be personally rewarded, he will be loved, a woman will want to fuck him, like he will be in some way rewarded for stepping up and taking on the parental investment responsibilities of another man. If I can tell society, hey guys, we all need to convince guys that they need to take care of these kids, right? I'm not going to be the one to tell Wes Watson he's a cuck, because essentially, by definition, he is. He married this woman who had 2 children from a previous marriage. Same thing with Andrew Wilson. Andrew Wilson is taking, let's say, 4 kids, right, from from Rachel, who had it. And again, I'm not saying they're bad people or horrible people, but if you're going to talk about what the definition of a cuckold is, that's the definition. You are taking on the parental investment responsibilities of another man. Congratulations, you've been cucked. Whether you sign up for that or whether it's done to you through deception is immaterial, because the end result is you're taking care of kids that ain't yours. You are promoting the dissemination of another man's genetics into the future. And if you don't have kids with that woman, guess what? You will go extinct while his genetics go on to the next generation. If we can build a society, a kinder, gentler society that essentially facilitates alpha fucks and beta bucks being the retroactive cuckold that pays for the alpha fucks kids. If we can build a society around that, which we have been doing since the mid 60s, then we can have what's called retroactive cuckoldry. And we can, again, this is one sex determining the biological reproductive future for the rest of humanity. So if I can convince you that you're going to go to heaven, or you're going to get laid, or you're going to get tax breaks, or you're going to get, I don't know, whatever reward, name the reward for not being the stepdad, but being the dad who stepped up. Effectively, you're normalizing cuckoldry, retroactively speaking, but you're normalizing cuckoldry. And you are, not only that, it's elective. You're electing to be a cuckold. And because all the guys in your church said, yeah, you're a good guy for doing that. Joseph was a cuckold by God because, Jesus was immaculate conception, was the son of God, right? And so Joseph was the guy who was like the beta who was like paying for all this shit. Like I have heard people say this before. I'm not saying this is my personal belief, but I've heard people make that comparison of the Holy Family, like Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, Joseph and Mary, right? Joseph was the first cuck. He was the first the stepdad, the non-biological father, according to scripture. So let me see if I can get to the rest of these here real quick. Like I said, I'm going to be stepping on a lot of toes today, but let me also explain here too. I tried to tweet this out, and maybe before I continue any further, I want to say that I like all these people very much. I don't have any axe to grind with anybody else, but I also have a commitment to objective truth. So think of this in terms of like iron sharpens iron. Maybe this gives Andrew something to think about. Maybe God forbid, maybe it gives Wes Watson something to think about. People kept asking me like, Rollo, when are we going to see you on Joe Rogan? Probably never, for the same reason that I'm telling you right now, because Joe Rogan is a stepdad. He's a guy who married a single mother. If I go on the Joe Rogan show and say, sorry, Joe, you're kind of a cuck, well, yeah. Yeah, I'm not going on that show. Trust me. Hi, Rollo. May I recommend a movie? Okay, I got to that already. Wait, did I get to you? I did. Sorry. I hope I'm getting all of these right. Let's see. Where did I get that? Sorry, it's not starring these things for some weird reason. Did I hit a default or something? Maybe I have to star them myself now. Sorry, I want to get everybody so I can. I'm kind of weird this way. Okay, so let me get back to your question here. Are cucks genetically low value men? Yes, they can be. But don't forget, I could probably point out to some guys who are like probably genetically high value guys who get it in their head that this is a good way of resolving their reproductive problem. Because really, when I talk about reproductive problems, I'm talking about how do you facilitate reproduction? That's an ultimate outcome. That's not approximate outcome. How do I get laid is approximate outcome, okay, or approximate goal. How do I reproduce? That's an ultimate goal or ultimate outcome. Okay. So how do I fucking come out here to Vegas? I can find you a whole bunch of hookers. You can go. You like escort? You don't even have to come to Vegas. You can get laid, right? Well, how do I find a woman to reproduce? Well, that's a much more complex ultimate outcome, is being a cuck a mating reproductive strategy for genetically low value males. I don't think being a cuck necessarily is, but I think that signing up electively to marry a single mother or taking on the responsibilities of a child that is not your own, I think that you could definitely make a case, especially today in a post-sexual revolution world, that is a mating strategy for guys who simply don't have who have very few sexual options. Well, I prefer single mommies. No, you don't. They're just easier to. But the price of fucking. Well, somebody go tell Thomas V what a scat pack is. But the price of fucking and the price of your future reproductions with this woman is you've got to pay for and support and be parentally invested in a child that came before you, that you had no say in determining whether or not the child was going to be yours or his or anybody else's. So effectively, functionally, a cuckold is a guy, as I said here, I'll read it to you again if you'd like. See, is a male who unwittingly invests parental effort in juveniles. It doesn't have to be babies who are not genetically his offspring. Okay. Now this is unwittingly. I think this should be blown out a little bit more. Now, of course, a husband who is aware of and tolerates his wife's infidelity is sometimes called a withole or withhold. We got to remember that, guys. I think maybe cuck sounds it rolls off the tongue a little differently. But what's the function? What's the latent function? It's one thing to call you're a cuck. You know, like that. I'm sure that's where Andrew wanted to go with this when he was like, throwing, spitting fire at Bevo, right? But you're not going to shame Bevo because Bevo got no shame. There's nothing to work with there, man. I'm sure people want to go, oh, he's a cuck. They want to, make a big deal out of it. But the thing is it's kind of falls flat. It's not really as effective for guys who are just like, yeah, that's a guy who has eroticized his jealousy response. Doesn't care if you call him a cuck.